Freedom of religion was one of the central tenets of the founding fathers, wasn't it? So, why would a military officer, a general no less, suddenly decide to penalize a community of faith? Let's find out. Hi, folks. Tony DeWitt again with another video on the law. Remember, I don't dispense legal advice here, and this is what we're talking about today. Under our Constitution, specifically the First Amendment, everyone in this country should be able to practice their religion. In fact, freedom of religion also means freedom from religion if someone doesn't wish to practice a religion. You can't be compelled about the faith you follow or how you follow it. Atheists should be just as welcome in society as are Catholics and Protestants. In fact, if you follow the teachings of the Christian churches, they should be more welcome because without the interchange of ideas between those folks and Christians, there would be no way for those folks to come around to the Christian way of thinking. But the bottom line is that everyone has the right to their own personal beliefs of conscience. I've said on here before that I am a Christian and that I believe. I hope that by my example, I demonstrate the qualities of my Savior, but I try not to proselytize. I'm not trained for that. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a biblical scholar. And I run the risk of maybe leading somebody down the wrong path. So I leave that to the professionals. One of the places where communities of faith have always been appreciated, however, is in the U.S. military. On pretty much every Air Force base and every Army post, even some camps in Korea, there are chaplains. There are military officers who are designated as chaplains, and they are there for the specific benefit of ministering to the faith community in the military. The idea that somebody might in some way question whether or not military officers who have a commitment to their faith are unfit to lead is really sort of out there. The main reason why the Constitution prohibits speaking on matters of faith in public schools is because public schools are compulsory. In every state, education for children is compulsory. If the government compels you to be in a particular place, they can't use it to indoctrinate you in a religion. Now, they can indoctrinate you in math, science, technology. They can teach you English or try to. That's part of education, but they can't embellish that with religion. And that's true irrespective of what religion they may wish to indoctrinate you in. It's really a matter of power, or I should say, the abuse of power. I point this out because when someone uses their power in a way that is inappropriate, it's especially unjust. That's a long way of getting around to the story that I'm talking about in this particular case. Today we have a story on X that tells us the National Guard in Idaho had implemented a policy of not placing Christians in command positions. So no officer who was identified as a Christian could hold a command position in the Idaho National Guard, according to a lawsuit filed there. Here's how this whole thing started. Long before he was appointed the commander of the recruiting battalion for the National Guard, he ran for mayor of Pocatello, Idaho, and he also ran for state senate. During those two campaigns, he made statements, public statements, that reflected a biblical bias toward certain lifestyle choices. These were statements that were made in the capacity of a private citizen. In other words, because a National Guard officer is only a National Guard officer when he is drilling, and that's when he's on duty, he wasn't making statements that were made while he was on duty. These were statements that he had made months, I think even a year previous. So 6 days into his command of the recruiting battalion, Worley was hit with an EO complaint by an enlisted member. According to the lawsuit, the sole factual predicates of the EO complaint against Major Worley were the press reports of Major Worley's opposition to Drag Queen Story Hour and the pornography, obscenity, and other inappropriate materials for minors in the public library, and Major Worley's speech on religious and moral issues that he gave as part of his political campaigns when he ran for elected office. So, as a result of this, the major was suspended, and then he was told he could resign or he'd be fired. He asked to speak to counsel and was told that if he spoke to counsel, he'd be fired. So he resigned, spoke to counsel, then withdrew his resignation and filed the lawsuit to remain a part of the National Guard. In the lawsuit, the most troubling claims were these. This is from the X post, which says the Idaho Army National Guard made clear that Major Worley's Christian beliefs were the sole basis for his removal from command. And the findings of the officer who investigated the baseless complaint and the brigadier general who affirmed those findings said in no uncertain terms that to avoid having commanders that hold these religious views, candidates should be screened to ensure they held no concerning religious ideologies. Anti-Christian bias, anyone? And this is from the text of the actual lawsuit. In other words, in light of Major Worley's religious beliefs, views, expression, and exercise, the investigating officer recommended that all candidates for command be scrutinized to ensure that their Christian beliefs, views, or expressions are discovered prior to being given command and reported to the Department of Defense for investigation of concerning extremist activity. And as bad as that is, it is trumped even by this. In other words, Brigadier General Packwood, the commanding general, affirmed the need to scrutinize potential candidates for command to ensure that their Christian beliefs, views, or expressions are discovered prior to being given command and reported to the Department of Defense for investigation of concerning extremist activity. As such, General Packwood affirmed the No Christians in Command policy by affirming the modification of the Idaho National Guard policy to reflect the rooting out of extremism and monitoring potential candidates for command to ensure they have no concerning Christian or other religious ideological views. Now, stories like this can really get your blood pressure up. You see something that certainly appears to be a bad action, and whether someone's belief system is Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, or something else, it should have absolutely no bearing on their fitness for command unless it interferes with the performance of their duty. What's really interesting about this is that when the people who were involved in the disciplinary process here for this major reviewed the EO complaint, they found that there was no hostile work environment, which is what the man claimed, that had been created by these prior statements. In other words, the major wasn't doing anything in command that in any way affected his relationship with his subordinates or came out, against those certain lifestyle choices that apparently were important to that particular sergeant. I've often heard it said that the First Amendment is the first refuge of scoundrels. And certainly that can be true in the area of matters of faith. The grossly disruptive behavior of the church, the Westboro Baptist Church, would certainly be cause for concern in a military command. Nevertheless, that church is certainly free to practice its religion, but someone who was a member of that church might not be free to run around preaching as an officer in the U.S. Army or any other military office in the country, solely because their actions are incompatible with an effective, disciplined military force. In other words, if you were to refuse orders on the basis of faith or you treat people differently because your faith tells you to, it might very well require your removal from command. Is at the end of the investigation, the investigating officer recommended that the National Guard not place any Christians in command positions. There could hardly be a better example of throwing the baby out with the bathwater than this one. You're tarring the whole faith with a very broad brush, allegedly because of some actions on the part of one officer. In effect, this is a wholesale level of discrimination based on religion, and it's not in keeping with the policies of the United States military. In addition, it may be unconstitutional. Article 6, Clause 3 of the Constitution says, the senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. But no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to an office of public trust under the United States. Now, we're talking about commissioned officers in positions of command. A commission comes from the president. The officer's commission is granted under the president's powers in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. It is a notice of appointment, a grant of executive authority, and an admonition for obedience. It is bestowed, the commission says, because of the special trust and confidence reposed by the president in the patriotism, valor, and fidelity and abilities of the appointee. The officer is charged to carefully and diligently discharge the duties of his or her office, and subordinates are charged to render the obedience due an officer of his or her station. Thus, being commissioned as an officer means there can be no religious test to hold that office. You could not refuse to appoint a Christian to a command slot on the basis of his being Christian, any more than you could refuse to appoint an officer to a command slot on the basis of him practicing the Muslim religion or being an atheist. All those things go against a strict interpretation of the constitutional no religious test phrase in that particular article. And as a result, I believe that the major here has really good constitutional grounds to pursue a remedy under the Constitution. The Constitution is clear that there be no religious test for officers holding a public trust, like military officers. Nevertheless, it would appear that this is exactly what the investigating officer recommended. This assumes the facts stated in the petition are true, and if they are true, that officer should probably be court-martialed for a violation of the public trust, expelled from the military, and remain disgraced for life. That is not who we are as a country. We do not discriminate on the basis of religion. But it wasn't just the investigating officer here. The person who was most at fault was the commanding general who followed this advice. He most definitely should have known better. If you're interested, you can follow the case on X by following @LibertyCounsel. I plan on doing that, and I'll try to keep you on track with developments in the case. Thanks for watching my video. If you have a request for me to cover a topic, please send me an email to the address above, and in the subject line put video request. If you have comments, drop them in the comments down below. If you found the content worthy, please consider subscribing. Since I started doing this work, I have always asked listeners to consider doing just one kind thing every day to make somebody else smile or make their life better in some way. Please consider doing that. It makes the world a better place. Now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine you may find interesting.